opening that door of communication, like in the household, from parents to kids to cousins to aunts and uncles to family to friends. Like if you can just say, hey, sometimes I don't feel okay and this is why, most of the time the person you're saying that to is going to say, oh, same, I didn't know we were allowed to talk about that.
Hello, my name is Remi Abrishami. I'm NormanAid's head peer counselor and a Bring Change to Mind club leader. Jack, thank you so much for joining us. My first question for you is, can you please tell us a bit about yourself and why you do what you do?
Thank you so much, Remi. I'm happy to be here. Regarding the context of kind of what we're doing here, a little bit about me is I moved to LA 9 years ago to be an actor, follow my dream, and I spent the first couple of years partying really hard and not getting much done with my life. And long story short, I bottomed out, as people in recovery say, and needed to get help severely. And I reached out my hand for help and I got it. And I've been sober for 7 years. And within that 7 years, about a year and a half ago, I was asked by a friend, a sober friend, if I would come to Crossroads High School to speak to an assembly of kids about drugs and alcohol, about mental health, what my experience has been, what it was like, what it's like now, and I did that. And that led me to being asked, why don't I do this sort of thing professionally? Not speaking to high schools, that's service, this is service, like that kind of thing, but professionally meaning work in the mental health and addiction recovery space.
Thank you for sharing. My first question for you is, how was it like getting help?
Emotionally, getting help was very, very difficult. In my experience, when you need help with drug addiction or severe mental health struggles, it takes a willingness that only comes from a deep surrender and submission to what's happening. So it took me a long time, and I went through a lot of pain and suffering before I finally had the willingness to be like, I'm done. I cannot do this on my own. I need the help of others.
So what was it like recovering? Like, did you have any resources or loved ones to help you through it?
Yes, and for the record, I'm still recovering, because recovery is forever. There's never a finish line of recovery. It's just a one day at a time recovering process. But having said that, it gets much, much more manageable and effortless and simple. In the beginning, I had to learn all that. I had to learn what recovery was. I had to learn the tools. I had to learn how to continually ask for help, because it's not just like you initially ask for help and then it's over. It's like a daily, I need help. Who can listen to me? Who's there to hear these thoughts that I have in my mind that are just out of my control, so that I don't reach for something again.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like a lot of times it can be hard, even reaching out and asking for help in the first place. So I want to applaud you for that. And that's why I think that our center, NormanAid, is so great, because if someone is struggling with substance misuse or alcohol misuse, the center is here for them. So I think that's great. This month is NormanAid's Substance Misuse Month. Can you please tell us about your experiences with substances?
Yes, of course. High school, I did not experiment that deeply with substances because I was on a very competitive sports team. I was a rower, and that was a year-round sport, and we were constantly training, so I couldn't really do any meaningful experimentation. When I got to college, on the other hand, I was totally free to do whatever I wanted. I could go to class, not go to class. Even when I went to class, it's like class in college compared to high school is a quarter of the time. It's amazing how much free time you can have. So I really started experimenting. The first major change that I made in college was someone said to me, you have a test tomorrow. You don't like studying. Try this Adderall. Okay. And I was like, what's Adderall? Oh, it's just, it's what we're all doing to make studying easier. You can focus more. And I said, great. So a friend of mine gave me a little orange pill called Adderall. I took it. I think it was a 20 milligram instant release Adderall, and I got high as a kite on it. I was so happy. All of a sudden, an introvert like me wanted to talk to everybody about everything. I wanted to seek people out to have conversations with them. I had never felt that way from a substance or really naturally ever. So I immediately began my addiction to Adderall. I went to a doctor. I said, I need Adderall. I have ADHD. And I took a test and I filled out all the boxes that made it look like I had ADHD. Maybe I do, but I definitely exaggerated. And I was given a prescription for Adderall, just like that. And I used it daily. I was prescribed probably 20 milligrams of Adderall in college, and I probably did 100 milligrams of Adderall a day. So I would run out of my prescription early and have to buy it illegally from drug dealers on campus. So that was my day. But every night when you're coming down from 100 milligrams of Adderall, there's a brutal crash. And I needed another drug to get through the brutal crash, so that's when I turned to alcohol. And I would drink anywhere from 15 to 20 drinks a night after that. So that was what college looked like for me. It was Adderall during the day, alcohol at night to deal with the crash every day.
Thank you for sharing. I just can't even imagine that in the first place. What piece of advice do you think you would give to someone, like, we're all in high school right now, all we're even talking about is college. Like, what would you have to say to someone who's considering joining a frat or a sorority and maybe wanting to experiment with drugs and alcohol?
The best friends that I have today are friends that I made in a fraternity. My closest friends, that'll be my brothers for life, I made in a fraternity. So I'm not here to say don't do a fraternity at all. I think that just having awareness over your own relationship with drugs and alcohol before you get to college is a really good idea. Just having an idea of if you might have addictive tendencies. Because what you don't want to do is walk into college having no idea of that. And then your addiction begins in college, and it's before you know it, it's out of control. That's my story.
I guess that kind of ties into peer pressure. So I guess, like, let's say you're at a party and someone wanted to offer you a drink and, like, you weren't comfortable with it. What would you do, like, if you were in high school in that situation?
It's easy for me to say, just say no and don't worry about what the other person thinks. But I understand that I'm 32 years old and I have 15 years of hindsight since high school, that's very obvious to me. But when you're 15, 16, 17 and you're at a party in high school and that happens, it's not so simple. It seems like high school is the be all and end all of your life. And I can sit here and tell you that it's not and just say no. But again, I realize that that's difficult. So I like to believe, and I'd like to learn more from you about this, that in this day and age, in 2024, maybe it's more acceptable to not drink and to say no. Is it?
I would say, yeah, the pressure has came down a little bit, I guess I would say, because there's excuses like I have anxiety, I'm on medication, I have practice tomorrow. So I guess in that way it can be a little bit more simple, but I feel like it can also just be hard when you're at a party and, like, everyone is drinking, like, you want to fit in.
What I really have, again, like I said, is hindsight. I have years of experience since I was in high school. And what I can tell you is it's much cooler if you're worried about being cool, right? If that's what's on the table, because I very much was, and to some degree I still am worried about being cool. But if you're offered a drink at a party and you're feeling pressure because you want to be cool, you want to fit in, you want to be a part of, what I would tell young people today is that it is so much cooler to be independent, have your own self-esteem, and people read your independence and read your self-esteem by your ability to make your own choices, come what may. So if you're able to say to someone, no, I'm not into that, thanks anyway, man, that's going to read very, very cool. It's going to read even cooler than saying, yeah, sure, whatever you say, I'll take what you give me. People respect people that are authentic and honest and that are individual. It shows self-esteem. So I would try to lean into that more and be your own person, because that will shine brighter than just taking a drink.
Good afternoon, Jack. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Benjamin Bakshian, and I'm the president of the Generation SOS Club here, where we deal with substance misuse. So for my first question, I was going to ask you, was there ever a time period or like a realization point where you realized that these substances are destroying my life? And was that the point that you thought, I need to go find help? Or was it later that you realized you need to go find help? Did you think you could manage it on your own? And how did that work out?
I had many realizations of these substances are negatively affecting my life, many. And then that turned into many realizations of these substances are ruining my life long before I got sober. It wasn't until these substances beat me into such a place of submission through pain and suffering again and again and again that I was finally ready to hang it up and just stop and ask for the help I needed.
So, where did you first go to find help? Did you turn to family members or friends, or like what community did you first seek help in?
I happened to have a best friend who I knew had a loved one who didn't drink. And that was kind of the extent of what I knew. And I was drunk. I was on a week-long bender at the time, and I was kind of just carrying, I wasn't kind of, I was literally carrying around a big Powerade bottle full of vodka with me all week and just trying to stay as drunk as I possibly could around the clock. And it was dark outside. I think it was at the end of the night, so it was probably like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I remember I just got to this place where I was like drinking vodka and I couldn't feel drunk. Like I had been drunk for so long that I just couldn't feel drunk anymore. And I realized, like, that was the realization. It wasn't like these things are ruining my life. It wasn't like these things are getting in the way of my potential. The realization was, oh my God, they don't work anymore. It's not treating my anxiety anymore. It's not treating my depression anymore. It's not making me feel good anymore. I don't feel it at all. And now I'm stuck with the things that I was trying to mask with these substances in the first place. And that's when I knew I was done. I was totally screwed. I knew I had no option left other than to reach out for help. And I remembered that my friend had a loved one, so I called him and said, I'm ready. I need help. Please introduce me to your loved one who is sober.
So you said that you first turned to these medications and these substances to see if you could fix like what was happening inside of you with the addiction and anxiety. What was your first response, and how did you realize that these weren't an effective way to treat like the anxiety and depression you were dealing with?
I'm really glad you asked, because this is kind of like the crux of what I'd be happy to talk about today anyway, which is that what I have is a disease of perception, right? That's what my addiction is. If I had to break it down, deconstruct what my addiction is to the barest minimum, simplest level, it's a disease of perception. What that means is when I walk into a room like this with y'all, my mind is telling me, you don't belong here, you're not good enough to be here, everyone's judging you, no one likes you. That's what I have in my mind. That's my disease thinking, that's my disease of perception. I don't perceive the world the way it's actually happening. I tend to naturally perceive the world in a way that wants me isolated and wants me away from other people. So I had that voice in my head, this perception all my life, and I didn't know it, because like when a fish is born in the ocean and is swimming underwater all day and its entire life, it doesn't know what water is. It's just normal. And that's what my mental health struggles were. They were just normal. I didn't know what anxiety was, because anxiety was all I knew. And I didn't know what this kind of negative thinking was, because it's all I knew. I didn't have any outside perspective on it. So when I finally did get drunk for the first time, I was 14 years old, and it was like the divine light was shining down on me, and I had finally arrived in a world where I could be comfortable. It was the first time I was ever really comfortable. And I said, oh, I found it. This is it. I'm just going to do this every time I can, and I'll feel great. These substances are not my problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a drug problem. I have a thinking problem. Because what I think about the world is generally more negative than what is actually happening. And drugs and alcohol were able to quiet that voice for me for a long time, and quiet my social anxiety, and make me feel like I was a part of rather than apart from. And the reason I got sober and finally got the courage to ask for help was because they stopped working completely, and I was left with that, what I call diseased thinking mind that is just out to get me. And that's when I knew the jig was up and I needed a new proper solution.
You work with young adolescents and teenagers who are trying to become sober. The demographic of substances that are being used today versus 20 years ago, we hear about drugs being laced with fentanyl. How does that impact how you respond to these young adolescents who are dealing with these issues?
It makes the conversation much graver because, to be totally honest with you, and your teachers might not agree with me, certain parents might not agree with me, in general, the way that I operate with other human beings is I say, make your own decisions, do whatever you are going to do, and when you suffer the consequences of that, I'm here for you if you need me. I'm not, don't do this, don't do that. I just tell you what happened to me, what my experience was, and if that is able to trigger something and stop someone from doing something, wonderful. But I'm never going to look someone in the eye and say, don't do this, because it's not my place. But the conversation, to answer your question, what is fentanyl doing to the conversation? What I'm saying to you instead of don't do this is, okay, do what you're going to do, but you might die. That's the difference today. You might die, and you really might. Because anything that you're picking up from a drug dealer around LA, if you're going after Xanax, if you're going after painkillers, anything that comes in a pill. In my day, when you bought a pill from a drug dealer, it was pressed by a pharmaceutical company through a factory, all that. Now they're pressing pills themselves, and they're sprinkling whatever they want into these things, and it's incentivizing for a drug dealer to sprinkle a little fentanyl into their pills because in the drug dealer's mind, the right amount might make their drug that much more appealing to their consumer, and that drives their business. So they're incentivized to put this drug that's killing kids into their product. So to answer your question, the difference between now and 20 years ago is more people are dying, an astronomical increase in deaths among young people.
I know that you spoke before that you were working as an actor. How has that influenced your own journey and also how you tell? You're a great storyteller and you're a great speaker. How do you think that has helped your experience working with clients and dealing with your own struggles?
Acting's great. It's really cool. It's really hard to be successful at. It's been meaningful in my journey because there were times in my life when I was younger that all that mattered to me was achieving fame and success in the acting business. And as I've gotten healthier spiritually and emotionally, the intensity of that desire has diminished over time. And I still love acting. I had a callback a couple weeks ago for something, but there's a lack of the need for the validation through that vehicle today than I used to have. And organically, I ended up working with young people as a tech. For anyone who's familiar with treatment will know what a tech is, but it's essentially you're working directly with the clients for 12 hours a day. You're taking them to meetings, you're talking to them all day, you're feeding them, you're giving them their meds. You're a friend, it's like a camp counselor for treatment. And I started doing that, and the reward that I felt looking in a teenager's eyes, as they say to me, like, I never thought of it that way. Like, thank you. I can't, like, the gratitude that I've experienced from these young guys. I've just never experienced such a reward, and I've just really fallen in love with it. And since then, I've moved into a different position at the treatment center that I work, and I get to support parents now. But yeah, acting really organically led me to where I am today, which is where I belong.
Today, for your own journey, how have you turned to different things other than substances, and how have those helped you replace what you were using the substances, for this fixing the addiction and the depression?
That's a great question, and I think it's also a great opportunity to tie into what we were talking about before we started rolling, which is that the opposite of addiction is connection. So let's take it back to as we've talked about already, my disease is a thinking disease. It's not a drug, alcohol disease. It's a thinking disease. Something happens in the world. Like, I come in here with y'all, and my disease puts a thought in my mind that you don't like me. I'm not enough for you. I'm a loser. Now, if I were still in active addiction, if I didn't have the tools that I have at my disposal now, I would hear that thought and I would believe it. And then that thought would escalate to other thoughts, and it would start spinning and creating a velocity of its own and growing and a momentum. And by the time I left here, I'd be walking out of here with this deep, dark thought process of I suck, I'm this, and I would know the only thing to shut that off would be drugs and alcohol. So I would go find drugs and alcohol, and I would temporarily get relief from that kind of thinking. That's what I would do 7 years ago. Now that I'm 7 years into recovery and I've learned tools and I know that the opposite of addiction is connection, here's what I would do. If I had a troubling thought in a situation throughout the day, which I do every day because I'm a human being and I'm a particularly sensitive human being, troubling thought happens, I'm picking up my phone, I'm stepping outside, and I'm calling another alcoholic or drug addict. And I'm saying to them, hey, dude, you'll never believe what my disease is telling me now. You'll never believe what I'm like. Listen to this. Someone just said something totally innocuous, totally harmless, and my mind is now turning it into an attack on myself. And then that person on the other end of the line is going to say, ha 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 ha. Same. That happened to me yesterday, or that happened to me earlier today as well. And then we'll talk about the fact that, oh, this thinking disease that I have, you also have. And we don't have to believe it. And then we start talking about other things, and then we have a laugh. And next thing I know, I'm connected to another person instead of believing this diseased thinking that exists in my head.
I love that quote, that the opposite of addiction is connection. But for people and adolescents who feel like they're alone in the world and they feel like they can't talk to anyone or they can't trust anyone, what would your suggestion be as to like who they could talk to or what communities they could reach out to?
I haven't been in high school for almost 2 decades, so I don't know what the landscape looks like today. I imagine that a lot of it is pretty similar. And as for what's different, I would hope that mental health advocacy has advanced a little bit since I was in high school, because there was basically zero. I hope that's true. I know that I'm sitting in a wellness area of the school right now, so my first thought is find a teacher, find a guidance counselor, find an adult that you just get a good vibe from, you get a kind vibe from, that you feel like they're a good person. Go to them first and tell them the absolute truth. Sometimes it feels like adults are just not cool in general, and they're not going to understand what you're going through. But it's really important to understand that the human condition is the same thing from when you're in kindergarten till your last day on earth. The human condition is the human condition. So although a guidance counselor or a teacher might kind of seem like a nerdy adult who doesn't wear the cool thing, the truth is if you go up to them and say, I'm depressed, I am having thoughts and I want to kill myself, that teacher is going to snap into, okay, this is serious, I'm going to help this kid. Adults are going to know what to do. And I think it's important that young people understand that adults were your age once too, and they've gone through all the same thoughts and all the same feelings.
Hi, my name is Alexander Gill, and I'm a NormanAid peer counselor here at the NormanAid Center. This week is our National Ribbon Week, and what advice can you give younger adults or kids here at the high school? What advice can you give them to stay safe at social gatherings?
We touched on this before in an earlier question, but if we're just going to speak specifically about social gatherings, what I'm taking is that you're talking about how to not do drugs and alcohol and stay safe in that sense. Here's what I want to share about this. If you don't want to do drugs and alcohol, yet you're feeling pressured to do so, I want young people to think about where that from inside them is coming from. What feelings do they have that are making that pressure hard to resist? Speaking from my own experience in those days, in that context, what made it hard for me was I wanted to be liked. right? I wanted to be cool. I wanted to fit in. So if the cool kids, or the people that I decided are cool, are offering me this thing, it's going to be hard for me to say no because I want to fit in with them, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at that for a second. The goal there, the reason that you want to engage in the peer pressure is because you want to be cool and you want to be liked.
Yeah.
So let's just go straight to that source. Forget the peer pressure, forget the offer of the drugs and alcohol for a second. Let's hone in on you want to be liked and you want to be thought of as cool. What I want to tell young people is saying yes to something that you're being pressured to do against your will is not cool. It's not a good look. It's not the way to be a cool kid. The way to be a cool kid is to be true to yourself. And I know that might sound lame, but if someone offers you something you don't want to do and you're kind of half-heartedly like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, I'll do it, it's not cool. And that same desire to be cool is the thing that's making people do it. So let's talk about what is cool. What is cool is being true to yourself, because that shines. It's like a light that people cannot ignore. When you're so confident in your own decisions, in doing your own thing, people are taken aback by that. People are arrested by that energy. So if I'm with a group of people and they're like, Jack, come on, do this. I'm like, yeah, no, thanks. And they're like, come on, man, you don't want to be one of us? You don't want to be cool? Like, no, that's okay. I'm not interested in that. It's not really my thing. And then you walk the other way. You might get some ribbing. You might get some jokes. You might get teased. But I promise you, deep within every one of those kids that's teasing you, they're intimidated. They're like, wow, that kid does not need our sign off. That kid does not need our recognition because he's okay. He or she or they are okay on their own. That is what's cool. So the next time you're thinking about getting caught up in peer pressure because you want to be cool, I want you as a young person to think about what's cool is being true to myself and doing my own darn thing.
Is there anything else you would like to discuss with the viewers that are watching?
I just want young people to stop dying at the rate that they're dying because of drugs. I want young people to have an easier life than I had as a young person, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I don't think that's that complicated. I think that if we as adults can be more honest with young people about life and about the human condition and about what it feels like to be a person today, opening that door of communication, like in the household, from parents to kids to cousins to aunts and uncles to family to friends, like if you can just say, hey, sometimes I don't feel okay and this is why, most of the time the person you're saying that to is going to say, oh, same. I didn't know we were allowed to talk about that. I feel that way too. And the burden gets lessened. Because if you try to carry this chair on your head by yourself, it's going to be heavy. But if I help you carry it, it's going to feel lighter. And that's exactly what we do with our mental health. We need to share it. So I want people to understand that talking to people they trust about their thoughts and feelings is going to be a more effective solution than picking up drugs and alcohol. Because I promise you, drugs and alcohol are going to come as a friend. It's going to feel really good potentially the first time you do it, but it will never be that good again, and it will slowly diminish its effectiveness until it no longer works at all. So let's just start with the solution that works.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors and partners, Michael J. LeBeau, NormanAid Peer Counselors, KBEV, and of course, we'd like to thank our listeners. Stay safe and make today well lived.